We have the case with the indictment number 2300241. State, are you ready to proceed?
Yes, sir.
All right, gentlemen, each of you appear to have retained counsel. I'm going to go down the line of the attorneys. Mr. Massey, are you prepared to arraign your client?
I am, Your Honor. I'd like formal arraignment by reading of the indictment under a plea of not guilty, and ask the court for a report.
And just for the purpose of the record, your client's name.
It's Emmitt to Martin.
I see Mr. Stengel.
Good morning, Your Honor. Demetrius Haley is my client. He's present in the courtroom. Wait formal reading of the indictment, enter a not guilty plea, and ask for safety.
Mr. Perry.
Good morning, Your Honor. John Perry on behalf of Mr. Tadarrius Bean. At this time, we waive the formal reading of the indictment off to the court. A plea of not guilty.
Mr. Summers, I see you back there.
Yes, Your Honor. On behalf of my client, Justin Smith, Charles Summers, we waive formal reading of the indictment and enter a plea of not guilty on behalf of Mr. Smith.
Mr. Bowden.
Morning, Judge. On behalf of Mr. Mills, we waive formal reading of the indictment and enter a not guilty plea.
Gentlemen, each of your attorneys have entered pleas of not guilty on your behalf. Understand that despite everyone's best effort, this case may take some time. Your attorneys are going to be receiving the discovery. Depending on how voluminous the discovery is, it may take some time for the state to collect it all, to turn it over to your attorneys. For your attorneys to review that discovery, to prepare their motions and prepare their case. So be patient. Work with your attorneys, cooperate with them, meet with them, go over the discovery. Make sure that if there are any delays, that these delays aren't on account of any of your actions. To those also in attendance, as I've explained to the defendants, this case can take some time. So we do ask for your patience, your continued patience, your continued civility in this case. We understand that there may be some high emotions in this case, but we ask that you continue to be patient with us. Everyone involved wants this case to be concluded as quickly as possible, but it's important for you all to understand that the state of Tennessee, as well as each one of these defendants, have an absolute right to a fair trial, and I will not allow any behavior that could jeopardize that right. So with that being said, we thank you all for being present. State, understanding that there may be some discovery that needs to be collected, we are going to continue this case out a little bit further to make sure that the discovery is concluded. We're going to reset this matter until May 1st, 9 a.m. State, is there anything else?
Your Honor, the only other thing on behalf of the state is I have a protective order as to each of the defendants to allow certain digital discovery video evidence to be provided.
Any objection by any of the counsel?
No objection, Your Honor.
No objection, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Ms. Massey, is there anything else on behalf of your client?
No, Your Honor. We did file our motion for discovery this morning.
All right, Mr. Bowden, anything on behalf of your client?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Perry?
No, Your Honor, but we did file a motion for bill of particulars pursuant to Rule 7C, Tennessee Rules of Criminal Procedure.
Mr. Stengel, anything on
Nothing
behalf?
further this morning, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Summers?
Nothing further on behalf of Mr. Smith this morning, Your Honor.
All right, gentlemen, we'll see you back here May 1st on that date. And we will now excuse the defendants and their defense counsel. We're asking everyone else in the courtroom to remain in the courtroom, remain seated until you're excused.
And with regard to everybody else, I would let the court know that the family is here.
Yes, thank you. You all are excused.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor.
A courtroom that included, of course, the family of Tyre Nichols. They sat a few rows back, something like 10, 12 yards from these officers who, as you saw, stood, each of them, via their lawyer, saying that they would plead not guilty. We're expecting the family of Tyre Nichols to come out of the courtroom at some stage. We'll see if, in fact, here they come.
I'll come out in a second for questions. Let me get the family back here. And the family will be making a statement, but they're going to do it outside the building.
Ben, we're live. Ben?
Still back. So Ben will be making a statement, and we'll be coming out to answer questions. So give me like 30 seconds with them.
Okay.
Ben and the family will be making a statement outside the courthouse here in a second.
Okay, and Ben will be making a statement here, yeah?
Outside the courthouse.
Oh, outside the courthouse.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks very much indeed. Ben Crump, the lawyer,
A few seconds.
representing the family of Tyre Nichols. There are a number of other players who were inside the courtroom, not least the district attorney for Shelby County. So it's a busy day here in this criminal courthouse. But you know, a fraught atmosphere, I would say. Very difficult, clearly, for the family, one would imagine, of Tyre Nichols. We will hear from them about their thoughts at being in a room with the individuals accused of murdering their son. A murder, if it is so convicted, that played out, of course, in video footage that they saw, although Tyre's mother, it should be said, found herself unable to watch the full hour's worth of footage, a beating that lasted something like 3 minutes. And of course, Tyre Nichols was calling out for his mother, wasn't he, when he was beaten? I've been to the site of where this all took place. What happened was he was arrested, pulled over for allegedly reckless driving. He managed to run away, and he got very close to his mother's house. He was something like 20, 30 yards, I would say, from his mother's house. And as police were beating him, he was shouting. 3 times he shouted for his mum. It was the final words that Tyre Nichols ever spoke. So clearly, very difficult for the family, a very difficult video to watch, and I suppose to have this all played out in public. But they want justice. I'll just check and see what the arrangements are. Sir, we're live on Sky News. Who are you, first of all?
Paul Hagerman, Assistant District Attorney.
Tell me, Paul, where are we in this process, and what's your take on what we've just seen?
Well, today was their very first court date. It was their arraignment, so sort of the start of the process here. I'm sure the process will go on too long for everybody, but everybody's committed to justice and to see this thing through. The family's back here, and they attended the court hearing, and I've got to spend some time with them for a second. They'll be making a statement later on this morning. I think they're looking for a place to do that right now. It may be outside or not, but we'll let you know.
Yeah. In terms of investigations, they continue.
Sorry. Yes, I do.
Yeah. Tell me about that. We may not have seen the last of the charges in relation to this.
Well, yeah, obviously this terrible crime happened in January, and it's just February. The investigation in this case and a lot of other cases after it's charged goes on, and it does. There are a lot of various agencies out investigating this case, and they're not stopping. Today was just the first court date for these defendants. It was their arraignment, and it's the start of the process.
There's been a lot of talk about how things moved very quickly in terms of the criminal justice process, charges laid relatively quickly. Why was that important?
It was important in this case. I think everybody here and everybody in Memphis, and I guess everywhere, saw that video, and there needed to be a statement made, and people needed to step up and do the right thing sooner rather than later. We felt that need, and that's what we did.
And it's important to have questions answered.
Yeah, Memphis and the whole world needs to see that what's right is done in this case, and it needs to happen sooner rather than later.
How's having the 5 officers all involved going to play a role in this?
5 defendants always presents a challenge in terms of logistics and everything. I think y'all saw that in there today. It was a cramped courtroom and all that. We believe it's important that everybody who took part in this criminality, everybody who did something criminal is brought to justice in this case. So just part of the fight.
Sorry,
Video that could possibly come out. I know that Attorney Massey put in a motion to preserve a lot of video from Skycop cameras, many of which we haven't even seen yet.
So it was a city that, I guess, released the videos to the media and to everybody. It's our obligation to make sure all that video is preserved. Any video having anything to do with this case is preserved and given to defense counsel. We can't release it to the media and stuff like that. So I know that there's been a lot of video that's been found in the case and taken in the case, and we'll preserve it all, and it's all been reviewed, and it'll be given to defense counsel.
Is it a single frame of video? Is it a single frame of video?
Video from the scene in particular that may or may not have been shared. How unusual is it to have that in this type of case? And can you talk about that video at all?
You're talking about the video released to the media from the Castlegate camera?
No, actually, shot by a police officer at the scene.
Oh, okay. I can't comment on facts of the case that may come up, during the litigation.
With the city releasing the video prior to this, does that hinder your case at all?
No, it didn't hinder our case. But our job remains the same. These 5 defendants are all entitled to fair trials, and that's what we're gonna give them.
Is it a single frame of video that suggests Tyre Nichols was driving recklessly?
As I said, there's been video taken from all over the place, trying to get to the bottom of every fact of this case, and we just have to wait and see as it plays out.
Anything else you'd like to say to the Nichols family right now?
Well, I've gotten the pleasure to meet the Nichols family. They're heartbroken, and obviously it's a terrible thing. They lost their son. They love their son. They still love their son, and they're good people. I got to spend time with them this morning, and after I leave y'all, I'll be with them some more. I couldn't be more impressed by the mom and the dad and the patience and the understanding they have with us and the statements they've made out to the public that it's important that Tyre is honored in a peaceful way and in the right way, and great people.
That can't have been easy.
How long have you been here?
And have you ever seen anything, or have you ever dealt with anything like this?
Well, I'll take both of the questions. First, the investigation is ongoing. So is there a possibility of more charges? Of course there is. The general my boss has been, extremely clear that this is step one. And today was just the start of the court process. And as you asked, the investigation goes on, and we'll see where that leads us.
Is this tough for you emotionally?
This is a terrible situation. I mean, we all had to watch that video, and I think everybody's heart went out. And today's court date 1 to try to get some justice and to do what's right in this case, and we'll see it out to the end.
So you spoke about the family. It can't have been easy for the family to be.
Unfortunately, in this job, you deal with heartbreaking things after heartbreaking things.
I know this is kind of putting the cart before the horse, but plea agreements, would you be open to that?
So cart before the horse may be the understatement.
Is that even on the table?
This was.
Do you want to see or how determined are you to see this go to trial, have this out in open court?
So this is day 1. Okay, they just got an attorney. None of the attorneys have seen the evidence yet, and some of the evidence is still being collected. So I can't comment on that. It is way too early. But what I can tell you is we are determined to see this thing through.
How long have you been with the district attorney's office?
21 years.
And your work here in your time, how much experience have you had with the Scorpion unit? How much experience have you had with the Scorpion unit?
So we're gonna.
Sir, how much experience have you had with the Scorpion unit?
Excuse me, y'all.
We're gonna come to an end.
But no,
excuse me, y'all.
We're come to an end. Mr. Crump. Mr. Crump is gonna make a
You were
statement.
late. Let him go.
well, we couldn't get in.
Excuse me, y'all. You were full.
Well, there you go, a gentleman from the attorney's office. Journalists falling out with each other. A spectacle at the end of this morning's events. Difficult, as you heard from him. He's been with the family. Difficult for them to be in the company, in the same room as the individuals charged with murdering their son. This is a lawyer for one of the defendants. Let's see if we can get a chat with him.
I will not be taking any questions, though I know you will ask them. I do have a brief statement I want to make on behalf of Mr. Mills. We want to start out by saying that, understandably, the nation's heart is filled with frustration, with grief due to the death of Tyre Nichols, and we understand that. These emotions absolutely should be channeled into demanding change in the way that we police our communities. It's also vital that we extend these demands to the way that we treat minorities and people of lower incomes in our criminal justice system. Let's not forget that my client is a black man in a courtroom in America. This is a country where black people are incarcerated at 5 times the rate of white people. A country where black people are 7.5 times more likely to be wrongfully convicted of murder than white people. Much has been said about the ways that this system has failed Mr. Nichols. I will work tirelessly to make sure that the system does not fail Mr. Mills and that a fair outcome is achieved. I want to remind everyone that the resolution of this indictment, to which Mr. Mills has pled not guilty, must be carried out without sympathy or prejudice, that it must be based on the facts and the law and not the raw emotions that our country is currently experiencing. Justice for Mr. Nichols will not be achieved at the expense of justice for Mr. Mills. We have a very long road of investigation and litigation ahead of us. Again, I implore the public to be patient, to be cautious in judging Mr. Mills. We look forward to defending him. Thank you.
Why is he not guilty? Why is he not guilty? He was in a group of 5 officers who brutally beat Tyre Nichols. Why is your client, Desmond Mills Jr, not guilty?
Why didn't he come to court like the regular
When you watch that video, where is the proof in that video that your client isn't guilty? He's guilty of being in a group of 5 who behaved like a pack, whose behavior was inhumane according to their police chief.
What's up, Blake? Hey, y'all have a good day.
Well, that was Blake Bolin, the attorney for Desmond Mills Jr, one of the 5 who is accused of murder and who pleads not guilty to that. Let's take a walk. There's a lot going on. That was the defense attorney. We've heard from the district attorney, the prosecutor's office, and as you heard him say, investigations continue. There may well be further charges. We're expecting a statement from Tyre Nichols' family. They're working out the logistics of that, where to speak to the media. They're talking about doing it outside. Let's just take a walk here to see if that's changed and if indeed that may take place rather closer to the courtroom. No, it's not clear yet, but well, you heard the way things are shaping up after a brief hearing, the first hearing in public, the first opportunity for these officers to plead not guilty. The defense attorney says justice for Tyre Nichols would not amount, would not be represented in a wrongful conviction for his client. That is the defense narrative at this stage. Let's go round. Something else is going on here. Somebody else is having their say on the matter. Oh, it's the district attorney. Let's have a listen in.
Assign them the task of looking at these kinds of officer-involved fatality cases for an independent and objective review of those as well.
Right, and I know the Scorpion unit, the practices, from what you've heard,
yeah,
how troubling has that been for you, given some of what you're trying to do as the newly elected DA?
So I think I need to be careful as a sitting prosecutor when there are pending cases about characterizing these kinds of things, but I think it's fair to say that what we've learned so far is a cause for concern about an overall culture that needs to be revisited, and I think it really opens up the need for a broader conversation about police reform, not only here in Memphis and Shelby County, but I think across the country.
What about specifically about supervision within the Memphis Police Department?
Say again?
We're talking about culture, and there's obviously a lack of accountability that C.J. Davis said to the city council. As far as what you're seeing, do you think there's also, what is your comment about the lack of supervision that was lacking that night?
Well, I mean, I think Chief Davis herself would probably acknowledge that a lack of supervision on that evening, was playing a role in what happened. And I think whenever you have these specialized units that, there is a danger that they can become.
Well, he let him finish his sentence.
Overly.
I don't know why
Stephen Mulroy, District Attorney. You're live on Sky News. Tell me,
trying to pull you away.
tell me about the culture and the problems with the culture of the Scorpion unit.
I mean, I think that's really a question better directed to the Memphis police folks. I just think in general, sometimes these units can become overly aggressive and they need more supervision, and that clearly was a problem that evening. And I think it opens up a broader question about reform. Now, if you'll excuse me.
Sure. There you go. Thank you for finishing.
I needed to go.
Thank you for letting him finish.
You texted me to come, right?
Okay.
That was Stephen Mulroy, the District Attorney here in Shelby County, the man steering this criminal justice process, charges and so on, charges that we have heard in court today, which range from, at the very top, second-degree murder. Murder in the second degree, that means murdering somebody, inflicting injury, knowing that they will die. And that is the charge faced by these 5 officers who appeared in court today. There are other charges, aggravated kidnap, among them oppression, but second-degree murder is the big one. That, upon conviction, could result in a jail sentence of up to 60 years. In terms of a trial, that could be many months away, of course. Today is the start, really, of the criminal justice process going through the courts. An arraignment hearing, very brief, before Judge James Jones Jr, at which you saw the not guilty pleas from all 5 defendants. Their attorneys speaking for them. I saw one of the attorneys smacking his defendant on the back as he spoke for him. You know, standing shoulder to shoulder with their clients who are clearly going to try to fight this charge. There's another media scrum taking place. Let's see if we can get stuck into this one. I'm not entirely sure who this is that's speaking. In fact, nobody's speaking yet. Possibly the family due to speak to us. Are the family coming out to speak to us, sir? Do you know? Is anybody coming out to speak to us?
No, we're just standing.
Okay, there you go. No, we're just standing here, is the word from my esteemed colleague. You know, we will hear more from the family of Tyre Nichols in due course. Upsetting for them. You know, I was sitting in the row behind them as they were in court. Stanley, with his arm round his wife, Rowan Wells Stanley, the stepfather of Tyre Nichols, who worked for FedEx, as did Tyre Nichols himself. And, you know, he was described as a good lad, a good man. Not perfect, said his mother, but he was damn close. He worked for FedEx, used to go home to his mum's for dinner. Indeed, they reckon that might have been where he was headed on the night that he was stopped and ultimately beaten to his death by these police officers. And, you know, we have learned about the life of Tyre Nichols. What we haven't learned, of course, are the reasons behind him being stopped in the first place. The police officers initially said it was reckless driving. That's why he was pulled over. The police chief has said there is no evidence to back that up, no evidence of reckless driving. And indeed, one of the officers, a 6th officer, Preston Hempel, in his subsequent statement said that he didn't see any reckless driving. You might have heard a question about cop cams, helicopter cams, and other footage that may be available. The individual from the attorney's office, he didn't commit on that one, but it may be that there is other footage from other sources that will shed more light on the death and the events leading up to the death of Tyre Nichols. We've seen an hour's worth of footage, but that starts at the moment when the police are on scene. He's being pulled out of his vehicle. The key question is, what happened before that? And that will shed light on this Scorpion unit, this specialized unit in Memphis that was created to tackle incidences of violent crime. It will shed light on their MO, you know, how they operated, generally perhaps, but certainly specific to Tyre Nichols, because what we see in the video we've all seen is instant escalation. Why did that happen? Did Tyre trigger that in some way? Was there some excuse, some reason why there was instant escalation, instant violence on the part of these officers? That, at this stage, remains a mystery, as so many other aspects of this story do, actually. Investigations continue. We've seen 5 individuals charged here. We may yet see charges against further individuals in due course. We're being summoned over here for somebody else appears to be speaking. Oh, let's have a listen then.
Mr. Bean in the press over the last month, and a lot of those statements are misleading about the person that he is. Mr. Bean has been nothing but a respectful, a good young man throughout his life. And on that particular night, you look at an isolated incident and try to measure the person. And so there are a lot of statements about him as a person that are just flat out untrue. And you look at the level of involvement of each individual defendant. And in that particular case, he was doing his job, no more, no less. He never struck anybody. He never did anything other than his job. Right now, we're in a posture that I've never seen a person charged before anybody knows the cause of death. There's no definitive information regarding cause of death at all. And so we got 5 individuals charged with murder. I represent 1, and it's an honor because at this point in time, I've never seen people jump to conclusions about an isolated part of a 2-minute excerpt about what was supposed to have happened on a particular night. And I stand by the notion that right now, due process in this matter has not taken place properly. There should be justice for Tyre Nichols, absolutely. But I also stand by the fact that I am going to demand justice for Tadarrius Bean.
Has Mr. Bean made any statement to you, written any statement? We heard from Is
Mr. Bean?
From Mr. Ballin.
I'm sorry.
His client wrote a statement. Has your client wrote a statement?
We've gone through a lot of information. There was a lot of information given on the front end during the time that when he was an active police officer and they were doing their inquiries at that time. There was certain information that was gleaned, from my understanding, administratively. But there's been no follow-up statements as of right now.
Sir, what in that video tells us that your client, Tadarrius Bean, is innocent?
Tadarrius Bean, according to the video, was seen apprehending a person after.
Every last one of them beating their mind, bro. That's murder.
Carry on, sir.
See, like we said, we saw the same.
What in that video tells us that your client, Tadarrius Bean, is innocent?
Say that once again.
What?
I can't hear.
Yeah, we've all seen
people that are part of the press that are saying.
We've all seen the video. What in that video tells us that your client, Tadarrius Bean, is innocent?
Tadarrius Bean never touched him in any way, striking him. Period. Tadarrius Bean has the ability, as a law enforcement officer, to make a lawful arrest based off of a call coming in. And so at this time, that's where we're standing right now. That Tadarrius Bean was doing his job at that time, and he never struck him. And there has been no information that we have seen as of right now that indicates that there's any sort of information that we can rely on to say that it's murder.
Why didn't he intervene? Why didn't he intervene and stop his colleagues beating a man to death?
I think you hear his voice consistently saying, "Sit up, man, so you can get air," etc., and things like that. I think you hear him consistently saying that. And Tadarrius Bean at no point in time did anything that would be different from a person who's doing his job.
He didn't stop his colleagues killing a man, though.
I'm sorry?
He didn't stop his colleagues killing a man. Why didn't he intervene and say, enough, stop?
I want to hear you answer that.
I want to hear.
That's his duty as a police officer.
I'm going to do something rare. Have you ever made an arrest?
No.
Have you ever jumped out of a car trying to apprehend somebody who you think might have committed a carjacking, a robbery, a rape, a kidnapping? Have you ever done that?
I've never stood by and let 4 of my colleagues kill a man.
And if a person gets called on a scene, you have a duty as a police officer to respond. If you're not on that...
He had a duty to stop a man being killed, surely.
To be absolutely clear, Mr. Bean was not. Mr. Bean was not on the first scene, so he don't know what...
The second scene is where Tyre Nichols was beaten.
I'm sorry?
Does he regret any of his actions that night?
I think at this point, he probably regrets being a Memphis police officer on that night, because had he not been, he wouldn't have been called to do his job.
Is there anything he'd like to say to the family of Tyre Nichols today?
I won't say what Mr. Bean says regarding the family. I will say that from my heart regarding the family, anytime you have a young man that dies, it's sad, and it's a horrible thing, and we don't want that to happen. So, but as far as where we are as of right now, we're trying to see whether or not a person can get justice the way that anybody else can, and that's my job.
To get up for air, the same as rendering aid?
I think at the time, that at the conclusion of making the arrest, from my understanding, there were people that were on the scene that are professional health renderers, from my understanding. So to say that, yes, ma'am, I watched the video. All right, go ahead.
Have you seen all of the
I'm
video
sorry.
at this point, or what have
I've
you
seen
seen?
I have.
Okay, so how many hours is it worth of? I mean, have they turned everything over?
I'm sorry, ma'am. I could.
DA Mulroy says that there's 20 hours, essentially, of video. Have you seen all of that?
No, nobody's seen it. We'll see it at the same time when
Would you
they
put in
release
a
it.
motion to preserve all of the video from the route?
Right, we want that. Yes, we're joining that motion. I think one has been filed.
You're going to join
that.
that motion?
Correct.
How much more video do you think can be collected? Obviously, it's video that could possibly tell more of this story, of this chase on foot between Tyre Nichols and the 5 officers, or at least 2 or 3 of those officers. Do we know if your client, Mr. Bean, was one of the officers chasing after Tyre Nichols on foot?
I apologize. I just can't hear the whole question. I'm sorry. Just say it one more time.
Do
I'm
we
getting a
know
lot of
if
background.
your client, Mr. Tadarrius Bean, is one of the officers possibly chasing Tyre Nichols on foot?
Oh, during the second scene. My client is on the second scene.
Right.
On his job.
But when going to the second scene, do we know if he's one of the officers chasing?
Not going to the second scene, but at the second scene, yes, he's doing his job.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
so
there's a suggestion that there's a connection somehow between Tyre Nichols and the officers involved, that they knew each other, and there was a reason why those officers might have wanted to inflict violence on Tyre Nichols. There are rumours. Can you comment on that?
I haven't seen anything to suggest any truth to any of that at all. Period. I haven't seen any of that.
What's your name, sir?
John Keith Perry.
John Keith Perry, and you represent Tadarrius Bean.
Yes, sir.
Thanks very much.
All right. Thank you all. Thank you all.
Do you mind if I grab you just for a second about? I'm Shimon.
Well, there you are. That was the attorney for Tadarrius Bean, and you know, the picture is building as to how this defence case for all 5 will be constructed. Clearly, you get a sense of every man for themselves, every man defending his own role in that particular situation. And he was talking about his client, Tadarrius Bean, saying that essentially he wasn't an aggressive player. These are my words, in that beating scenario. The question I asked him, and it was the question why he was instantly fired in the first instance from the police force, that as an officer he had a duty to protect the public. There was a duty to intervene when a man was sustaining fatal injuries. None of the 5 did that. On the evidence of that video, nobody stepped in and said stop. And that is a key part of the problem here. And we'll see how the prosecution case pans out, but I would imagine it will be around that argument that 5 individuals acted in concert, and that you can't pick any one individual off from that central charge, that they acted as a unit and therefore are culpable as a unit. But the defence clearly will take shape along 5 different individual paths.
James, thank you so much for all that extra detail there. And as you said earlier, certainly all 5 of those defendants weren't seen in that video to appear to offer any aid to Tyre Nichols after he was injured and lying on the ground. We will cross back to you very shortly, James, because of course we're waiting to hear from Tyre Nichols' family and their lawyer, Ben Crump, outside the courthouse. That shot there, ready and waiting for their arrival. And James, I understand, is going to reposition for us outside the courtroom, so we'll cross back to him very shortly. But in the meantime, we're going to bring in our 2 guests, Jasmine Rand and Randolph McLaughlin, who are here to commentate on this case for us. Jasmine, to you first. All 5 of these former Memphis police officers have pleaded not guilty to the murder of Tyre Nichols today in that very brief court hearing there in Memphis. Your reaction to these not guilty pleas by all 5 of these former officers?
I'm not really shocked that they pled not guilty. I expected them to plead not guilty
You know, what I am shocked by is the statements of their counsel afterward. I don't think that was a smart move on behalf of their counsel. It was particularly brave of the attorneys to stand up there and say that their client never hit or struck or came in contact with Tyre Nichols at all, especially admitting he's not even seen the video footage or all of the video footage that's involved in the case. And to hear them talk about their denial of due process. What about Tyre Nichols' due process? Where was those officers concerned with the due process of Tyre Nichols not to be summarily executed on the streets in Memphis that night?
Yeah, let's just bring in Randolph for his reaction as well. Randolph, was really interesting, as Jasmine just alluded to there, that we heard from those two defense attorneys for two of the defendants. Tadarrius Bean, his defense attorney, claimed that we don't yet know the cause of death and that due process in this matter has not taken place. Your reaction to that?
I thought, look, as first matter, defense lawyers have a difficult job in a case like this. Each individual defendant has to be found guilty or not guilty based upon their individual conduct. Understood. But I agree with Jasmine. The comments that these men made, trying to wrap themselves in this mantle of due process, comparing themselves to young African-American males who were caught up in the criminal justice system, prosecuted and thrown in jail for hardly any evidence many times. These men are not those young kids. These men were trained police officers. And when the lawyer for Mr. Bean said he was just doing his job, well, what was his job chasing an unarmed man? For what reason? And what was his job when he stood by? And if you watch the video, you'll see at various points, officers holding Tyre Nichols up so other officers could beat him, could kick him like he was a pinball in a game. I mean, it's almost like unbelievable to me. I understand their job. But you know what? They need to keep their mouths shut and just do their job in the courtroom. Because if they think that going to the public to change anyone's minds based upon what we have seen, that's a fool's errand. They need to focus on their jobs and not try and make themselves a victim. Seriously, a victim? What was their job that night? To arrest a young black man and beat him to death. If that's what they did, allegedly. Was that their job? Let's be frank. These same officers, this same unit, had been caught in a number of incidents like this, beating up people, dragging them out of cars, cursing at people. That's what this unit did. The only difference here is they went too far. They didn't know to stop the beatdown before they killed him. So I'm sorry. Yes, it's going to be a long process. Yes, there'll be a lot of discovery and more videotapes will come out. Understood. But here's the bottom line. If you want to change police behavior, you've got to change the law regulating police conduct. That's what you have to do. Here in the United States, we have a George Floyd law that's trying to get passed in Congress to make policing more fair and transparent. Can't get it out of Congress. So here's what I say. The state of Tennessee needs to take that law and adopt it so that all of us can start to be secure in our homes, secure in our lives. You shouldn't be subject to death because you, quote unquote, recklessly drove. Look at the way the officers approached him. As soon as the car stops, they're cursing at him, they're yelling at him, they're snatching him up. And he says to them, "Why are you guys doing all this to me?" I mean, it's clear he doesn't know what's going on. And his reaction of running away, that was a natural human reaction. In his mind, understandably, these men were going to kill him or certainly cause him serious bodily harm. So he was doing what your adrenaline tells you to do, flight or fight. He didn't fight back. He never raised a hand against these cops. He was trying to get home to his mother, and they killed him for it. I'm sorry. This is an outrage. So yes, they have a right to a defense. Yes, they have a right to due process. Here's an interesting question. This case is going to be tried in Memphis. And I know Memphis is a predominantly African-American city now. So are they going to be willing to try this case before a jury of Memphis residents? Maybe that's why they're making these, I think, ridiculous public statements, wrapping themselves in the mantle of civil rights lawyers. That's what we do. That's not what criminal defense lawyers do when their officers are accused of killing an unarmed black man, period.
Yeah, Randolph, really interesting that you mentioned that the two defence attorneys we just heard from there, quite surprising that they were willing to comment on camera at this stage. And as you say, portray these former police officers essentially as victims themselves. Jasmine, because of course, in court, in trial, all they will care about are the facts of this case. And certainly the evidence is clear in that body cam footage. You can't recreate what happened. It's there for the jury to see for themselves.
Yeah, it's there for the jury to see for themselves. In this case, so much of this incident was captured on footage. They're going to see the images of the officers holding him up so other officers can beat him. They're going to see that the officers' actions took the life of Tyre Nichols, and they're going to hear testimony that Tyre Nichols was running home to his mother's house. That's all he was trying to do. He wasn't fighting back. He wasn't hitting anybody. He didn't break any laws. He was running home to his mother's house, and they beat him down in the streets of Memphis, 20 to 30 yards away from his mother's house as he cried out, asking her for help. That's what the jury is going to hear. And I believe when the jury hears that, they're going to convict all of those officers of second-degree murder.
And Randolph, of course, what do you make of the fact that they behaved in this way towards Tyre Nichols, knowing that they were wearing body cams? What does that tell you?
Well, frankly, that's the most shocking thing. One of the more shocking things. When police officers resisted the use of body cams when they were first being put out, because they were concerned that you wouldn't see the whole story, and police work is very rough and violent, and you get the wrong idea. So they didn't want to wear them at first. But guess what started to happen? Good police officers wearing body cams were exonerated when their conduct was being evaluated because the body cam, proved that they were innocent of any crimes. But here, I don't see how these officers in any shape, fashion, or form could believe that what they were doing, especially in the second incident when they captured him and are beating him like a runaway slave, how they could think this was okay. But what it tells me is they thought that what they were doing was okay, that it was nothing wrong. You could hear them saying things like, I want to stomp him down. It boggles my mind. But to be frank, the only difference between what happened here and what happened in George Floyd's case and what happened in Eric Gardner, who was killed in Staten Island here in New York, when an officer used a chokehold, allegedly, is that you have video counts. But often the officers, when there's no video, engage in similar acts of brutality and then engage in another police practice called test-the-line, where they make up a story and they all support each other. So that's the only difference. So when you say, does this shock me? No, it doesn't shock me at all. I've handled enough cases of police officers shooting and killing unarmed individuals who had a mental health crisis in their homes. So that doesn't shock me. What shocks the public is that they're seeing it in real time. What happened in George Floyd, that's why they had that outrage and that outcry. Here, I think we're correct. It's not happening at the same level because the response of the local officials has been so different than anything I have ever seen in any part of this United States, in this country. It was quick, it was immediate, and it was definitive. And they released the videotape quickly so we could all see it. So I think that, as I say, what happened in Memphis and what is happening in Memphis is a blueprint. It's a model for how we should handle these cases in the future, because swift justice is still justice. Justice delayed is still justice denied.
Now, Randolph, Jasmine, there is a bit of movement outside the courtroom. I will interrupt our interview and conversation when we hear from the family and from Ben Crump, their lawyer, very shortly. But just in the meantime, Jasmine, just further to what Randolph was saying there, you know, there's also in that body cam footage, it shows that when Tyre Nichols is lying on the ground, badly injured, clearly not well, no officer did a welfare check on him or offered him any aid. How much is that going to be further damning detail in this trial?
You know, as Professor McLaughlin pointed out, so much of this is cultural and endemic to policing in America. And, you know, just like he said, it's not shocking to him. It's not shocking to me. It's shocking to the public because they don't see these cases on a daily basis like we do. But I very commonly see these type of cases. We just don't always have cameras. And so what we often see in these cases where first there's this engaging in police brutality, then there is a failure to render medical aid. I think that is going to add insult to injury when the jury sees that. They're also going to see that there was a clear intention to inflict harm because there was no desire to save his life from them or from the fire department employees who arrived on the scene either. And so I think that is going to further inflame the jury and, you know, maybe lead to some stiffer sentencing from the judge.
Now, Randolph, of course, we're waiting to hear from the family and from their lawyer. Now, it's so reminiscent of so many other cases that we've heard before. I met Ben Crump a number of times in Minneapolis when he was representing George Floyd's family. And here we are again, hearing the same calls for justice, the same calls for reform from the same people like Ben Crump, from Reverend Al Sharpton. What do we need for change?
What we need less, I'll be honest, demonstrations are important, brings out the public, but we need less demonstrations and more civic engagement. What do I mean by that? If activists are really concerned about this issue, and it's not just the police brutality incident of the day, and we all focus on it until we need to get involved at the local level with the police, with the local prosecutors, and with local legislatures. Here's a phenomenon. How do we hire police officers? I think we don't test them appropriately. I'll give you an example. I used to work in a program where we trained service animals, service dogs, to work with veterans and disabled people. And we had to determine as trainers whether that dog had a predator instinct. What does that mean? That when a squirrel ran by, they'd go and chase the squirrel. So if the dog had a predator instinct, then we couldn't use them in the program. So similar, if I can determine by observing an animal whether or not they have a predator instinct, can I do the same thing observing human behavior? Because here's the question you need to know. As hiring a police officer, does that officer have a propensity to use violence to solve problems? Do police officers sometimes have to use force? No question about it. When violence is needed and violence is present, yes, violence will be used, understood. But not every situation.
I'm just going to interrupt ever so quickly, just to update our viewers, anyone tuning in now, to let them know what they're seeing on screen. That is an image of the door at the courthouse in Memphis, and we are awaiting Ben Crump, the lawyer for Tyre Nichols' family, and his family, who are due to appear any moment now before they give a statement outside court. And that camera is our correspondent and camera crew there in Memphis, awaiting Ben Crump and Tyre Nichols' family to try and grab a word with them before they go to the microphones to make that statement. So we will cut into that as soon as they appear. But just in the meantime, Jasmine, there was a 6th police officer there that day who's been fired from Memphis police force, but not charged. Tell us about them.
So that is Officer Preston Hemphill. You know, first of all, he is a white officer. And so it's certainly concerning that, you know, the only white officer who was involved in this incident that we know of so far, who was there on the scene and on the ground, has not been arrested. We know that he tasered Tyre Nichols. We know that he engaged in beating him without any justification when he was first pulled out of the vehicle. He made comments such as directing people to stomp his ASS. I don't want to, you know, say that on camera. And then we also know that he lied and falsified information and evidence during the investigation. And so he needs to be charged with second-degree murder, just like these other officers have been charged. I really want to go back because I've been working alongside Ben Crump for 15 years now. I actually began working with Ben as a law student. And then when I graduated, became the head of his civil rights division. And one of my first cases ever was the Trayvon Martin case. And I will say, we have progressed as a society where we are finally getting arrests and where we are getting accountability for these cases. We are getting convictions. We are able to recover monetary damages for victims of police brutality, but we're not where we want to be. Where do we want to be? What do Ben and I want to see? We want to save lives. We don't want to be on the other end of this, responding to another case where another unarmed young Black man or woman is another victim of police brutality. We want to be on the forefront of this, changing the culture of policing so that we are not responding to death, that we are saving lives.
And Randolph, a thought from you, if I may. All 5 of these police officers involved in this incident with Tyre Nichols, all charged with his murder, have pleaded not guilty today. What do you make of that? And what do you think we'll hear in terms of the defence that they will try and present in court?
That's their right. I've yet to see a criminal defendant ever, and I've done criminal defense work. I handle murder cases myself. I've never seen a criminal defendant walk into court the very first time they appear.
How long do you need me?
Sorry, Randolph, do continue.
Yeah, I've never seen a criminal defendant walk into court the very first day and say guilty. No one does that. So it's their right. The criminal process has to run its course, and I respect that process, and it will. I mean, there's no allegation, no suggestion, at least on my side, that anything violating their due process rights has occurred or will occur. So it's a long haul. What I think these officers are going to do eventually is turn on each other, eventually. Because the ones who have the lower charges or the less culpability because they didn't engage in the final acts of killing him, et cetera, those officers will start to try and exonerate themselves. That's what's going to happen. And they may start pointing the fingers at others. The prosecutor was asked, are you talking about plea deals with anybody? Not yet. It's too early, but they may. They may, because if you do a plea deal with some lower level officer to turn against the others, and he starts telling you things that you didn't know otherwise, that's valuable testimony. And it's done often. You take a defendant, you cut them a deal and have them turn on the others. That could happen here.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Jasmine, your thoughts on that? Randolph, they're predicting that these 5 officers will turn on each other through the course of this trial. And our correspondent in Memphis was reporting earlier that all 5 of these officers are said to be remorseful and regretful about what happened that day. But I guess one of the questions that prosecutors will ask is, well, what did you think would happen when 5 of you were essentially carrying out that behaviour on a single individual?
Yeah, and so I think I absolutely agree with Professor McLaughlin that the officers will begin to turn on each other. And I think you even heard some of that today. I think there was the implication in the statements from some of the attorneys that, well, my guy didn't do anything. I don't think my guy, landed a punch or landed a blow. So why is he being criminally charged? And I think that we're going to continue to hear that dynamic develop. And that's certainly a common strategy that that defendants use when they're defending themselves against criminal allegations. So I expect to see that as well.
And Jasmine, what more can you tell me on this so-called Scorpion unit that all 5 of these former police officers were members of, this supposedly an elite unit that was set up in 2021 to tackle crime in Memphis? They have a pretty bad reputation, this unit. Tell us more.
Yes, they do have a pretty bad reputation. And when you create these units, one of the problems is you're actually creating a mob mentality. You are rewarding people for going out and being, quote unquote, tough on crime, and you're rewarding them for engaging, for getting, drugs off of the street. Sometimes people get rewarded for officers get rewarded oftentimes for shooting people. What officers are almost never rewarded for is de-escalating situations. And that's one of the biggest problems I think we have in our police force is there is no reward for saving lives in that way, for de-escalating situations. And so I think that there has to be award system and incentivizing officers for de-escalating and being responsible and intervening when they see other officers using unlawful force, like we saw in the Tyre Nichols matter. Not one of those officers intervened, and that's one of the biggest issues that we have, is that nobody stopped that brutal beating to try to save his life.
Yeah, Randolph, your thoughts on this as well, this so-called Scorpion unit, a supposedly elite unit these 5 former officers were part of. They were known for being violent in Memphis, and that unit has now been disbanded. What are your thoughts on this? Why was an elite unit like this carrying out a traffic stop?
I wouldn't call this an elite unit. I would call it a mob unit, because that's what they acted like a mob, and stopping people and just dragging them out of cars. But these units have been used by cities. New York City itself did this. They create these units because there are high crime situations, and we have to take the guns off the street, and we have to be a little more aggressive in those situations. Okay, that's a notion. Here in New York City, we had a unit called the Street Crimes Unit, and they would roam the city in unmarked cars and jump out of cars and confront people. Well, one night, they confronted a man named Amadou Diallo, an African immigrant in the Bronx. And according to the police officers, he pulled out his black wallet and pointed it at them while they had their guns out. Now, that's just crazy talk. They shot him 41 times, 42 times, dead. And then after they killed him, they went into his apartment to look for things. What were they looking for? Evidence of crime, no doubt. Drugs, guns, to basically smear this man, to say, this is why we killed him. He's a bad egg. So after that incident, that unit was disbanded. Same thing happening here. Was the unit in, let's think of the name, Scorpions. Well, what do Scorpions do? They're killers. They sting you and kill you. That's what they do. Why would you put that in the mentality of the officers? This is what we do. We go out and sting and maybe, in this case, kill. No. These units need to be disbanded, because the problem is it encourages the warrior mentality. There are 2 types of officers that we have. One are called guardian officers. You can't get into your car, you call the police. Someone's died in your home, family member, you call the police. They come and they help you. That's the guardian or caretaker function. The warrior function, that's the Street Crimes Unit. That's the Emergency Services SWAT team. They dress in military gear and they go out and literally on a wartime mentality. And in some situations, you need that. If you got a terrorist holding up in a building with a bomb, you need a warrior to come in. The problem is we don't identify when the police officers are coming into the units, who are we dealing with? Is it a warrior mentality person who's going to use violence as the first means of defense? Or is it someone who has a more caretaker role who will engage in de-escalation conversation? Here's what this case really is about. Bottom line, it's about excessive force. Police officers are empowered to use force when required, but it's like force for like force. So if someone's resisting arrest violently, I can put my hands on that person.
I'm just going to interrupt and jump in for a sec. Let's just have a listen to Ben Crump.
They're gonna leave.
Ben, you're live on Sky News. Just very quickly, we'll watch your news conference. What did you think of this morning's events, the not guilty pleas?
Yeah, people, man.
What do you think?
I told you, he's tough, man. I think, as Rovon said before, she got to this courtroom. She came here because she wanted them to look her in her face. And none of them had the courage to look her in her face. We'll talk at the press conference.
Ben Crump, the lawyer for the family of Tyre Nichols, you heard him there. The mother's challenge today was look me in the eye to these 5 individuals accused of murdering her son. None of them, as you heard Ben Crump said, did. He's a man, he's the family, the lawyer for the family, a man often described as the Attorney General of Black America. You might recognize him from the cases of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and others. The family are going to hold a news conference, as he said, in about 3 or 4 minutes. We'll bring that to you live. We're on floor 5 of Shelby Courthouse. That will be outside downstairs, and we will hear from Rodney and from Rovon, the parents of Tyre Nichols, the parents who were yards from him as he was beaten to death. He was trying to get to his mother's home, and the last words we heard from Tyre Nichols were his shouts, 3 shouts for his mum. And, you know, that's the reason that she has not been able to watch the video of her son's death. Let's keep an eye on that door just now. That's where the family are with their lawyers. They'll come out and expand on their thoughts about what was quite a highly charged court hearing. It lasted around 10, 15 minutes, but significant in terms of criminal justice, because these 5 individuals were entering their not guilty pleas. But just in terms of the interaction, it was significant, hugely significant for the family, of course. For the first time, they were in the same room with the 5 individuals accused of murdering their son. There is some movement behind those as the family are obviously on the way out to deliver that news conference very shortly. Rodney, as I say, Tyre Nichols' stepfather, Rovon, his mother, who described her son as a good man. Not perfect, she said, but damn near. And we're going to head outside now just to relocate and for that news conference, which will be in a matter of minutes, and we'll hear the thoughts of the family of Tyre Nichols in full. So stay tuned for that.
OK, James, thanks very much. We'll cross back to you as soon as there's any movement from Tyre Nichols' family and lawyer there. But let's, in the meantime, just continue speaking to our guests. Jasmine Rand and Randolph McLaughlin, thanks very much indeed for staying with us. As our correspondent in Memphis was just detailing there, you know, so many of the details of this case are just so upsetting. The fact that Tyre Nichols was shouting for his mum, appeared to be running towards her house to escape, you know, the actions of those 5 police officers. Jasmine, to you, if I may. I know that you were involved in the George Floyd case, and certainly in Minneapolis, many tried to argue that Derek Chauvin, who of course was found guilty of the murder of George Floyd, you know, was a bad apple. But in this case, with these 5 police officers from Memphis, the bad apple theory doesn't stick anymore, does it?
I mean, I don't think the bad apple theory stuck even in the instance of George Floyd, because what we saw was something very similar. We saw multiple officers. You know, Derek Chauvin is the one that had his knee on his neck. But what about those other officers that stood there and did nothing and watched him die in real time? And so we're seeing the same thing play out again on television, where this time it was different officers who were inflicting the brutal beating all at the same time. But nobody was intervening. Nobody was intervening to stop it. And so unless the culture of policing changes, we're going to keep seeing this happen. I do think that with increasing criminal consequence levied against police officers for killing unarmed Black men and women, we are going to see, I'm hoping that we're going to see a decrease with police brutality. But as you know, Attorney Benjamin Crump has said, this is the blueprint. We have to see swift justice. Each time this happens in America, we have to see an immediate arrest, immediate transparency, the release of the videos, and the accountability. And so, you know, what we're seeing, I hope will continue to become a blueprint. And I do expect to see other arrests as this case evolves as well.
And Randolph, just as Jasmine was saying there, you know, describing the deeply rooted systemic issues as she sees it in policing in America when it comes to brutality and violence towards Black Americans, how have these systemic problems been allowed to proliferate and grow like this? What's behind it?
Well, in a word, it's what we expect. The perception of young Black men in the media, on the news, every day, every city in this country, you turn on the local news, you'll see some young Black man getting arrested for some crime of some sort. So the perception becomes young Black men are dangerous and they're criminals. So when the police encounter them, the police officer, also a part of society, seeing these same news accounts, hearing from fellow officers, their first perception is, this man's dangerous. He's a criminal. He may hurt me. Because I also say this, Police officers don't get up in the morning and say,
Okay.
let me go and kill someone.
Randolph, I'm going to jump in. Randolph McLaughlin, Jasmine Rand, thank you both so much. Let's listen in to Ben Crump, the lawyer for Tyre Nichols' family.
Give us just a few minutes. We're waiting for a couple of the media representatives to set up. Stephanie.
For anyone just tuning in, this is the live scene in Memphis outside the courthouse there, where there's been an arraignment hearing, a plea hearing today for 5 former Memphis police officers charged with the murder of 29-year-old Tyre Nichols, which of course is a case that shocked so many people in America, around the world, after body cam footage was made public, showing officers stopping Tyre Nichols in a traffic stop and pulling him out of his car and beating him. He later died in hospital, and those 5 now former Memphis police officers have appeared in court today, charged with Tyre Nichols' murder. They've all pleaded not guilty, and we are looking at that live scene there outside the courthouse with the family lawyer there, Ben Crump, with the brown hat on, and Tyre Nichols' mother, who we expect to hear from very shortly as well. She is there, and of course, very upsetting detail from this case where Tyre Nichols was heard shouting for his mother as he was being beaten up by these police officers on the 7th of January. That traffic stop captured on their body cams, that footage made public, and certainly it's reignited a lot of anger in America over police brutality towards Black Americans. And let's just listen in now to Ben Crump, the lawyer, and the family of Tyre Nichols.
Everyone ready? Yeah. Okay. Good morning. I'm Attorney Ben Crump, along with Attorney Tony Raminucci, Judge Ernestine Doyce, and Attorney Van Turner, who's also the president of the NAACP chapter here in Memphis, Tennessee. Kareem Ali, my investigator, and our legal team. We have the honor of representing the family of Tyre Nichols. Present with us is his family members, in particularly his mother, Rovon Wells, and his father, Rodney Wells, who will give very brief statements this morning in the aftermath of the arraignment of the 5 officers that have been indicted for the murder of Tyre Nichols. Also, it's important to note that this was very emotional, and there were a lot of things that were not said in the courtroom today in the proceeding, but it was a very informative day as we move closer to justice. And our legal team and the family of Tyre Nichols wish to express gratitude to District Attorney Steve Mulroy, Paul Hagerman, and the entire District Attorney's team, who is charged with prosecuting this matter on behalf of Tyre Nichols, as they do with every citizen in this jurisdiction. We are again relieved that they have given information to try to dispel some of these rumors and innuendo that we keep being bombarded about, that somehow this was something personal. No, we are aware that there were photographs that were taken and none of them were sent to all of these rumors that are out there in the social media world. The family is dealing with enough grieving the death of Tyre and their brave fight for justice than to have to deal with all these salacious rumors. I know in George Floyd, they had to deal with them talking about Chauvin knew somebody who George Floyd knew, and that was the reason he kept his knee on his neck. And then in Botham Jean's case, who was killed in the apartment by the white policewoman, they alleged that they were having some kind of affair, which all were bogus and untrue. And just like with Tyre Nichols, all these rumors that are circulating are bogus and untrue because we have the text messages. The prosecutors have been able to verify exactly who those pictures were sent to. And so what we want to remain laser focused on is getting justice for Tyre Nichols and being able to define the legacy of Tyre Nichols. And the people who are most appropriate to do that is his mother and their family. So you're going to hear from Rodney Wells, and then we're going to introduce Miss Rovon Wells to talk about how they felt and why they had to be here today for this arraignment of the former Memphis police officers who are charged with murdering Tyre Nichols. And I think it's important to note that even though we want everybody to get due process, we are champions for equal justice and due process. But as Police Chief Davis said, Judge Doyce, it's important that we take swift action. It's important that we move swiftly towards justice. So we don't want there to be any unnecessary delays in prosecuting this case with respect to everybody having their day in court. Those officers get to have their day in court, but my guy, Rovon Wells and Rodney Wells, get to have their day in court, and we don't want this to be forever. We got video. When people in our community do something on video, it don't take a long time to prosecute them, right, Attorney Turner?
That's right.
It don't take a long time. And so first you will hear from Mr. Rodney Wells, the father of Tyre Nichols.
Hi, everybody. My name is Rodney Wells. I had to be here today to make sure that justice gets done for our son. This is a glorious day. This is the beginning of the process. So the statement's going to be very short, and I'm just glad to be here. Our family's glad to be here, and I appreciate everybody coming out.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. And now you will hear from Tyre's mother, Ms. Rovon Wells.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. As my husband stated, this is the beginning of the process. We're going to be here at every court date so that they can know that we're here. They need to, I don't know, I feel, it's funny because I feel very numb right now. I feel very numb, and I'm waiting for this nightmare, basically, that I'm going through right now. I'm waiting for somebody to wake me up, right? I'm really waiting for somebody to wake me up. But I also know that's not going to happen, okay? I know my son is gone. I know I'll never see him again. But we have to start this process of justice right now. And I want each and every one of those police officers to be able to look me in the face. They haven't done that yet. They couldn't even do that today. They didn't even have the courage to look at me in my face after what they did to my son. So they're going to see me at every court date, everyone.
Exactly.
And until we get justice for my son.
Amen. Hello.
And so, yes.
And note the choice of words that Rovon used. As she told Judge Dorsey and us, they didn't have the courage to look me in my face. Not dignity to look me in my face, because when you look at the video, there was no dignity there. But they didn't even have the courage to look at her in her face, and that's what she came to the courtroom to see today. Them look her in her face, eye to eye. How could you do this to my son?
And they didn't.
Okay.
What did you
No. Wait. Are you finished?
Yes.
Okay. All right. We'll take a few questions.
Rovon, what did you think when you heard the words, not guilty?
Well, sir, they're going to say that. You know, that's a procedure that everyone's going to say and do. I'm going to leave it up to the district attorney's office and to get them prosecuted and everything, and then they'll find them not guilty. They'll find them guilty, I should say. So them saying they're not guilty, that's a preliminary thing. Everybody's going to say that. And I was expecting it, so it wasn't nothing new.
Okay. Judge Ernestine Dorsey is going to make brief remarks before we continue with the questions. Judge Dorsey is
retired Judge Ernestine Hunt Dorsey, and let's not get me out of place, because I want you to know that the process is the process, and I'm about transparency, so that's the first thing I had to tell you. I was retired. But it's good to see the country and the state still interested in what's happening in our community, and especially in the prosecution of this case. Because this case is a case that's pretty much going to be a cornerstone. You know, when the builders start rejecting stones, but this is going to be a cornerstone that the builders will not be able to reject. So that is what I see. And
the process is
the process is.
Yeah.
Can you lay out what do you think the next year will be in terms of this case? So the next hearing is in May. And then what is the next?
I can only do it. I mean, I've been a trial lawyer, and I can tell you the process. It's not as swift. It's not as swift as the indictment. But the indictment was the most important thing to get the wheels of justice to truly roll. And so this is going to be processed, and it's not necessarily going to be held up by trying to slow the process. It's just how time is. And so most criminal cases don't come to trial, and I'm assuming this is going to go to trial. That can't tell you how long, but it's not going to be at the end of the day.
Steve, we know, like in George Floyd's case and Ahmaud Arbery's case, that there may be federal charges brought here. And so we want there to be full justice. And so as we look at the process on the state, we understand, just like in George Floyd, there may be federal charges contemplated that may be announced, and then they will take a parallel course. But we know in George Floyd's tragic killing that those officers were prosecuted in the year. So the hope is that we have a blueprint going forward on all these tragedies. Before we take any other questions, Attorney Van Turner, would you like to give a remark?
Yeah. We again want to thank Ms. Rovon Wells for her courage, Mr. Rodney Wells for his courage. It takes a lot to sit there in the courtroom and to face individuals who took actions that they did not have to take. Nothing that evening that we saw, that you saw, provoked them to do what they did to Tyre Nichols. And here we have a family, we have a son that's lost a father, and we just, we feel their pain, and we're going to be here with them throughout the way. But let's also understand that this case is going to be a landmark decision, but it also needs to lead to policy. How do we stop this from happening again? The state needs to pass the Tyre Nichols Police Reform Act.
Amen.
We need the governor to sign the bill. The governor, Bill Lee, needs to stand up for this family. We want the thoughts, we want the prayers, but we want action.
Amen.
We want this bill passed right now, the Tyre Nichols Police Reform Act. We want them to withdraw the bill to get rid of clerk. The Citizen Law Enforcement Review Board is what we have. That's the citizens' eyes over law enforcement. The police can't continue to police themselves.
Yes.
So if we are really serious about justice for Tyre, we want to make sure that there's a swift prosecution and that these guys serve the time for what they did, and we want to make sure that there's swift action at the Tennessee legislature with passing this bill, and we want them to immediately withdraw the bill that would undo clerk right now, today.
Yes.
We want them to withdraw that bill because that's the citizens' eyes over law enforcement. We're going to continue to pray for this family, and we're going to continue to say justice for Tyre.
Justice for Tyre.
Thank you so much, President Turner, for your leadership. You good?
I'm good.
Okay.
Ms. Ravon, since January 7th, your life has been completely, your family has been scrutinized, the whole world has been watching your family. But you've responded with grace and compassion that you owe no one. So I wanted to ask you, what's holding you together right now, and what is sustaining both you and Mr. Wells?
Well, the only thing I could tell you is the prayer. I have people reached out to me from all over the world. I have received sympathy cards from people that I don't even know. People are praying for our family. God is what's holding us up. And the fact that, again, I have to always keep in mind that my son was sacrificed for the greater good. That's what's holding me up, and that's what's keeping me together. And the fact that I do have 3 other children that I have to stay strong for, because if I break down, then they're going to break down. So me being a mother, I have to stay as strong as I can for my other children.
Amen.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. And then we'll come to you. Certainly, the video speaks for itself.
Mr. Crump, you mentioned the photographs that were taken from the scene. Police Chief Davis has said they've been shared with other people. You said the prosecution talked to you about those photographs. Do you know who those photographs were shared with?
Apparently, this isn't the first time that particular officer has done this, but we just wanted to dispel the rumors that the family were being bombarded with, and they didn't want to have to deal with that additional trauma and drama. So we want to clear that up once and for all.
Do you know who they were?
We do not, but they know. Yeah.
Can you elaborate on the findings of your independent autopsy results, specifically related to any substances being in Tyre's body that those officers alluded to on that video?
No, we don't have the toxicology yet, but we feel confident that Tyre was not under any kind of intoxication or anything like that. You know, Miss Ravon and Rodney, they know Tyre and what kind of person he was. Who Tyre was what you saw in that video. While everybody else was escalating it, using excessive force, Tyre was de-escalating, trying to do everything in his power to remain calm. That's who Tyre Nichols was.
Exactly.
Actually, that also, piggybacking off of that, we know that the incident report that was authored that night does not line up exactly with reality. One of those quotes from that report says that the officers came in contact with you, that you thought your son's drink might have been spiked. Was that a fabrication?
Taken out of context.
It was something taken out of context.
And so the prosecutor will deal with all of that.
Yeah, I can't go any further with it, but it was taken out of context.
Completely out of context. Completely taken out of context. We think that from the beginning it was a conspiracy to cover up this murder. That's
right. Yes.
Ben, can I ask? The city has said that it's going to release more video and recording. Are they going to offer you to see those first?
Yes, they did. They did say that. We don't know when, but they said they would, out of respect for the family, they would let them see and hear the videos.
Then should Preston Hempel, the 6th officer who was at the scene when Tyre was first stopped, should he face charges?
Well, certainly Miss Ravon Wells is asking that question, and so it is our hope that every officer who had anything to do with the death of her son will be held accountable, and we will leave that for the prosecutors.
Mr. Crump, what is the timing of any civil litigation against the city of Memphis?
Well, we're trying to get the completed autopsy report in our hands, but we will be seeking full justice for Tyre Nichols. That is criminal culpability, civil accountability, and as my co-counsel Van Turner said, policy. We want legislative action, because getting justice for Tyre isn't about just having accountability of these officers. It's about trying to prevent anybody else from being killed in this manner. One last question, ma'am.
Mr. Crump, you said that you saw the text that went along with this picture.
No, I didn't see the text. They told us about the text, and they told us that all of this stuff that is rampant out there on social media is completely untrue. It's bogus, and they know that the text messages who they went to had nothing to do with all this stuff that you all have been hearing on social media, and some of you have reported. And the only reason that they thought it was important, and I think it's important to speak to it, so they will quit harassing the family over this ancillary matter, has nothing to do with the reason why this happened to Tyre Nichols. This Scorpion unit had a pattern and practice of doing this to black people in Memphis. That's it. You don't need to go no further than that. We talk about these special police units or these proactive policing, and they do this stuff in marginalized communities of color, where they trample on the constitutional rights and human rights of black and brown citizens. They don't do that in the white communities to white citizens. That is why Tyre Nichols was killed, because of this excessive force policing of black citizens. Thank you.
Mr. Crump, I live in the city of Memphis. A lot of Memphians are concerned that these officers are still on the street. A lot of these officers are still on the street. I mean, they've been rearranged. What do you, should the city of Memphis be concerned?
That was the lawyer for Tyre Nichols' family, Ben Crump, there speaking along with Tyre Nichols' mother and stepfather, reacting to that arraignment hearing a little earlier in Memphis of the 5 former Memphis police officers charged with Tyre Nichols' murder. They entered a plea of not guilty today, and that is Tyre Nichols' family reacting along with the lawyer Ben Crump. Let's just cross to our correspondent James Matthews, who's outside the courthouse for us and was listening to that press conference. James, very emotional words there from Tyre Nichols' mother, where she said that she feels she's living a nightmare that she's waiting for someone to wake her up from.
Yeah, emotional indeed. Although I thought she held it together fairly well after a difficult moment, being in the same room as the individuals accused of murdering her son. Glorious was the word used by Rodney, Tyre Nichols' stepfather, to describe today. Glorious because the criminal justice process is kicking in. They are now on a track at the end of which they hope to see justice for their son. They're describing it as a blueprint, the speed with which charges were laid against these 5 individuals. And you heard the thoughts about charges possibly against a 6th, because there is a 6th officer. His name is Preston Hempel, and he was at the scene of where Tyre Nichols was arrested. He was wielding the taser, pressed it against Tyre Nichols' leg, deployed the taser as Tyre Nichols ran away, and was heard to say on his own body cam, "I hope they stomp him," and using profanities. So the family want to see charges brought against him. They want charges against everybody who appeared in that very shocking video. But as they depart Shelby Courthouse today, they are content, as things stand right now, content that they are seeing a measure of justice that they want for their departed son. A difficult time, as I say, in that courtroom, a packed courtroom, 10 yards separated the family with those 5 accused of the murder of Tyre Nichols as their attorneys delivered their pleas of not guilty. We got a sense of how the defence will play out. Essentially, every man for himself, it appears, having spoken to a couple of attorneys, and you heard them, they're talking about individual roles on the night that indicate a degree of innocence on the part of individual police officers. So at this stage, they're clearly not staying together as a unit, although the prosecution would see them very much as having acted in concert.
OK, James Matthews, live in Memphis for us there. Thank you very much indeed for all your coverage. Thank you. Let's just return now to one of our other main stories today. The family of missing mother of 2, Nicola Bulley, has told Sky News that every day is a struggle as they wait for news. Nicola's father, Ernie Bulley, also said he hopes a Sky News reconstruction of Nicola's last known movements will help get some answers. It comes after the Information Commissioner said he will be asking Lancashire Police to explain its decision in why they revealed her struggles with alcohol and the menopause. Now, Nicola disappeared 3 weeks ago while walking her dog in the